He reversed his car over me.
How'd that happen?
I think you messaged me about some...
I messaged you?
I think so.
No.
Yeah, you commented on one of my posts.
I don't just comment on random people's
I
posts.
swear to God you did. I'll pull up receipts. And you were like, where are you from? Nice kicks. Girls from Texas don't usually have
Don't get fresh like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you definitely caught my attention. The girls usually aren't getting as coordinated up with their kicks and everything like that. So
I think we started talking, and then recovery came up. And then I can't remember if I had seen the documentary or if... I think I had seen the documentary.
I saw you were a runner, and I noticed we had a bunch of mutual friends in the recovery community. So I kind of put two and two together. So that must have been the only reason I felt comfortable enough to message any of that. But how did that happen? How did you end up here? Where did it all start for you?
I don't even know where to start, but...
Where are you originally from?
Well, I was born in New Mexico.
Okay.
Santa Fe, New Mexico. And I'm adopted, so I was adopted very young. I was less than a year old. And my mom had a opiate addiction. So there was a lot of toxic situations between me, my sisters, and our biological fathers. So I was taken pretty young, and I was adopted into a home into Texas, and I've grown up with the same family. I didn't really go to foster care or anything. I was very lucky to avoid that part of the struggle. I was adopted and grew up in Texas with my family now, and they're the best. I'm very close to them. They couldn't have done anything better,
Right.
Honestly. They're the best people you could ever meet. I think they blame themselves for a lot of the things I went through. And I just have to put it out there right away that I don't think there was anything after all the years of therapy, all the years of learning about family dynamics and how, families work together for different things. I don't think there was anything they could have done better.
Mm-hmm.
I think I just had my own issues that, as you know, no one can save you from. So,
man, I draw back a lot on my stepfather, my stepmother, being a step parent and having to deal with somebody else's child that's not theirs, especially when they have problems like we had. But then to even another degree of being, adopting and stuff like that and dealing with that, those are some angels, man. To been through some of the things that you've been through and for them to still be there and you guys still be close, it'd be hard. It'd be hard for me. I imagine at some point I'd be like, all right, get the fuck out of here.
I know. I used to always joke. I'd be like, I would have returned my ass so many fucking times. Send this bitch back to New Mexico. She's ruining our family, because they ended up being successful with the pregnancy with my little sister.
Really?
They didn't think they could have kids. And
fact. No shit.
So I have a sister that's 5 years younger than me, and I put her through hell. I tore up the family for years. I was selfish in my addiction, and they never, ever gave up on me. I recently had to make amends with her, and it was hard, but, I think that they're supportive of the journey I'm on. But it was hard for a while, and, they didn't have to do any of it. And I would even say that they, never entered that toxic area of enabling. I really feel like they couldn't have done anything better. Because they would set boundaries with me, and they would say, we can't continue supporting this lifestyle, but they never, made me feel like I was left out in the dark alone or anything like that. So.
Right. That's incredible. Were you getting in trouble a lot when you were young, or?
So I always felt like I didn't fit in, and I think almost every addict can relate to that feeling. I just felt uncomfortable. I felt insecure at a very young age. I remember just feeling like I hated myself, even as a child, and I didn't understand why. And I think a lot of it was anxiety. I remember watching the Reading Rainbow. Remember that show?
Mm-hmm.
And there was
Reading Rainbow.
And there was an episode on how to handle if you had a house fire, and it was just fire safety, stop, drop, and roll type shit. And I was spiraling, and I was that's my first memory of having anxiety, and it was such a young age, and I was running around the house putting wet towels under the doors and just terrified that a fire was going to start for no reason. I hadn't been through any trauma yet. I don't know why I was already struggling with anxiety at a young age. Um, so I went to a middle school in seventh grade and kind of just started hanging out with the wrong crowd, I
Mm-hmm.
guess you could say. And
Because you want to belong, right?
yeah, and I was one of the only white girls at that school. And so that was rough at first, but I was like, well, if I act like a bad bitch, I'm going to be with the other bad bitches.
Mm-hmm.
So, I started wearing big Scarface t-shirts and trying to fit in with them and ended up matching their lifestyle pretty quickly, getting into fights. And I ended up losing my best friend from that middle school to it's actually a crazy story. I don't think I've ever talked about this, but she was got in a street fight in a trailer park that we used to all hang out in and ended up getting hit by a car and passing away. And that was like my first memory of death, like, and feeling like so overwhelmed with like this one person I finally found that like I connected with. We had all these plans to stay together through high school and to navigate through life together. And she always had my back when we got into physical altercations. And, it was like, that was my bitch. And like, I
Mm-hmm.
already, so that's like my first memory of having to deal with grief. And I was smoking weed at that time, but it wasn't really like, oh, like I'm addicted.
Yeah.
And I love the feeling of being numb. It was more so like, okay, we're at parties and I hit a J, whatever. And I remember walking home with my friend and getting pretty fucked up that day after she died and feeling like, okay, this is where this is at. Like, I don't have to feel sad. I don't have to feel anxious. I don't have to feel anger. Like, I'm just fucked up.
Yeah.
And I remember walking home and being like, all right, like, this is it for me. Like, why the fuck would I feel anything ever again?
Yeah.
Like, I didn't want to feel any of those feelings. So I started using pretty heavily at that age. And that's kind of when things started escalating to me skipping school, running away, stuff like that.
Right. My one childhood friend Matt, me and him were his mother passed away when we were young. I think we were seventh grade, and he and I were just bonded. You know what I mean? We basically lived at each other's houses, went on vacations together, all that. And then I joined the Air Force. I ended up talking him into joining the Air Force. So we're going and we're doing this together and all that. And then eventually I would lose my way. And I just recently got back connected with him. I haven't talked to him in probably 15 years, but this dude went one way, was in the military, became a police officer, fucking has a beautiful family, house, like all these things. And then I took my route of anything. So for us to come back together and both be at good places in our life and stuff like that, it was very surreal and very cool. I also lost a very, very, very close friend of mine when I was in the military. And I did so many hard drugs around him that he basically became like desensitized to it. And so eventually, when he wasn't around me, he ended up getting high too, and he OD'd, passed away. And I always have carried around this guilt, like I contributed to that. You know what I mean? Like I didn't hand him the drugs, I didn't tell him to do them or whatever, but he saw me do it so much, where I feel responsible. And the only thing that's ever helped me come to terms with all that is, I believe in God, and I do believe that He's up there looking down on me. I do believe my boy Corey's up there. And so, like, I made a pact and a promise with myself when I was getting sober that everything I do, I'm going to do to make sure I make him proud. Because if that was the case and I was the reason, I'm going to make a living amends now. And so I don't know if that helps at all, but if you believe they're looking down on you, every action, every time you talk to somebody, every person you help, do it for them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. And I think we talked about this a little bit on the phone one day when I was having second thoughts about doing the podcast. I, a year ago today, actually lost one of my she was the most beautiful human ever, and I lost her to the battle of addictions a year ago today. So, it was pretty powerful when I was talking to her mom about coming on here, and I was like, I don't know, like, you know, public speaking isn't my thing, and like, I don't really tell my story to a lot of people, if ever. And so I was like, I just don't know if it's what I want to do yet or if I'm ready. And she was like, no, you have to go on there and do it for the people that are still struggling and the people that don't have a platform to say what they want to say. So that was pretty powerful because, it's the death anniversary today, 1 year ago.
Is it?
Uh-huh.
Really?
1 year ago today, we lost her. And, like I lost my biological mom to an overdose, fentanyl. And I've seen so many people that I've been close to And I do find some comfort in like believing that they can see what I'm doing now. And I do hope that there's, some kind of connection, that they see me fighting a battle that they lost
Right.
and raise awareness around the fact that like this is a fucking epidemic. Like this is taking over cities like faster than anything before. And it's like who's talking about it,
Right.
And then there's just a lot that I've been through that I feel like people need to talk about more because I think there's a stigma. I think that there's a shame and a guilt around some of the things that have happened. And I think there's not enough women speaking up about what they do afterwards and how they bounce back. And so that's what I hope to do.
Right. Well, you're doing it. I remember when we sat down and you started sharing some of your story with me, like it hit me, and there's I truly feel that I think more women than not that are in recovery have been through some of the things you've been through to a degree, but I don't think it's talked about much, and I think there's a lot of people that'll hear this and hear your story and pull a lot from it, even people that are still suffering and still out there. So you start getting into drugs, start getting in a little bit of trouble. How did that eventually end up escalating into like the hard drugs and the whole life?
Well, I definitely would like to put a focus on my connection with toxic relationships and my addiction. Like, I was so unhealthy and sick in my head and my heart that I wanted a connection with a man or a woman so badly that, like, I would put myself in these crazy situations in order to try and fill that void. I was constantly trying to fill a void.
Yep.
I don't know with what, whether it was toxic relationships, drugs, alcohol, like trouble, adrenaline, fighting. I was always trying to fill that void. So I'll kind of just go through some of the things that have happened on a timeline. I moved out pretty young, running away, running away, running away. And I ended up in basically a trap house living there. Got affiliated with a pretty well-known gang in Texas and was living with a bunch of older men and was dating one, and we started using pretty heavily cocaine. That was mostly it at that time. There was a little bit of opiates, a little bit of meth, kind of, but it was mostly cocaine at that time in my life. I was about 17 when things got really, really bad. And
So 17, you ran away from home. You're snorting coke in a trap house.
yeah. Um, and the man I was with at the time, I kind of got sucked into that mentality of like ride or die. Like, this is my fucking dude.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have his back no matter what. If he beats me up, I still have his back. Like, and I hate that that's still kind of a thing. Like, I still see things on social media and I still see things in rap music and in, toxic relationship culture that is like, if you're down for your man, you're down for your man. If he's locked up, you're down for him. If he hits you, you're down for him. You're a rider, like it's almost glorified and romanticized. And I loved that shit. I fed off that shit. Like, I was like, I'm a rider. I'm a real bitch. Like, I've got, and it's like
Yep.
kind of embarrassing now, but,
Right.
and I wanted that so badly. And I wanted that to be recepted. I wanted to feel that from him too. And big surprise, I didn't. But, that's kind of when her sponsor. I'm supposed to call my sponsor at 1 o'clock. Hopefully she gets the memo.
She's spreading some experience, strength, and hope. It's okay.
Yeah, so that's kind of now I've lost my train of thought.
Hold on. So I exactly what you're saying. Like I used to glorify this lifestyle of wanting to be this badass all the time, wanting to be a fucking tough guy. I've been to prison, like all this shit. And I thought that was like it. You know what I mean? And now I sit back and I look at people do that. You know what I mean? I look at the kid coming into treatment that's got his pants down around his ass and he's talking like he's black or he's talking like he's a hood motherfucker, but he's from ritzy ass somewhere and mommy and daddy paid for him to go everywhere like that. And I just try to like step back and number one, I'm like, why the fuck did I used to do that? Like I looked ridiculous doing that shit. But coming up how you came up, like obviously, naturally, you're gonna have you know what I mean, like the adoption thing. You're gonna have that pull to want to belong somewhere, to want to feel like somebody's got you, no matter what they're doing to you. You know what I mean? Like I could definitely see how that would happen, especially at the tender age of 17.
Yeah. Yeah, so I kind of just started running with them and like getting into like little things, nothing crazy. And that was like when I really started like feeding like the street life. Like I loved to be on the streets. I loved the clubs. I loved the fighting, and that's kind of what my life was for a while. And then I ended up, getting pregnant and losing the baby because I got beat up so bad, and it was just like, what am I doing? Kind of like, what the fuck am I doing? And it kind of turned into this situation where I was living with, I don't want to use too many names on this, but I was living with someone I was pretty close to that was in the gang life. He was not like a romantic interest for me at all. He was just a really good friend. And he ended up getting in a really bad car wreck and basically being in a coma. And I kind of ended up being his main caretaker. So I was just in this trailer getting high as fuck and day in and day out, waiting tables to support my addiction and like taking care of one of my homeboys that was like basically in a coma. And I ended up like leaving that situation. And that's when I started meeting men at the restaurant I was working at. And so I got into another toxic relationship that ended in me getting ran over by a car twice.
How twice?
So,
Please explain for the listener who hasn't heard this.
okay, so I was working at the strip club and I came home and I was fucking faded. Can I cuss on here?
You can say whatever you want.
Because
Lean into being you, please.
I say fuck a lot. And I
As
can't.
long as you're willing to post it on your social media when we collab.
Okay. I came home and he was pissed, and I got in a huge fight with him. And we were staying at one of my best friend's house that night, and she kind of lived like in a house that was like a driveway that was kind of like country road-ish. And so he was like pissed off and he was leaving, and I ran out after him to try and continue arguing, I'm sure. And I was pretty high off Oxy, Xanax, and drunk. And I don't really know what happened. I think that he swears it was an accident. I don't really know if that's true, but I won't put that out there. And he reversed his car over me and then drove away while driving over both of my legs both times. And I woke up in the hospital and they were like, yeah, you're probably never going to walk again. And good luck to you.
Jesus.
So that was and that was 3 days before my 21st birthday.
How do you accidentally pull over and then reverse and feel that ba-bump, ba-bump and not know if...
I don't know. That's why I had to like lead with it. It was like a country driveway. Maybe I'm still delusional. I don't know. But so I had.
What were your injuries?
Okay, so this is what gets crazy. So they had all kinds of muscle tearing damage, bone and cartilage damage, but I didn't actually break any.
No shit.
And so they ended up asking if they could do a study on me, because they said that I had enough drugs and alcohol in my system to like completely knock out like a 500-pound man. And here I am at like 110 pounds and high as a fucking kite.
Right.
And my tolerance was just so high that I was taking a lot of pills and drinking so much every day that they said that's actually what saved my legs.
Really?
Because I was so high, I didn't tense up or anything. I was just like, so I ran with that. I was like, well, Oxy's just saved my life. Like, might as well like make it my thing. So that was like, let's see, that would have been 2011. And so that's like right when Oxys were like really, I feel like getting pushed heavily, I feel like. Does that time frame seem right?
It was probably a little before that, but maybe in your area they were just hitting hard or something like that.
Yeah. So I got sent home from the hospital. They told me to come back in a couple months and have a follow-up, but they literally said we don't know if you'll ever walk again because of the damage done to your muscles. And because it was just, I have a picture, but it was just my legs were just like black and blue, destroyed, swollen. There was no actual bones that were broken, but there was just so much damage done in the internal tissues, and my toe got ripped off. Like I was like covered in bruises. Obviously, I had some hip injuries. My wrist was hurt. Like it was a lot. And so I don't have like really strong memories during that time, but I just remember having to move out of my apartment because I lived on the second floor. I was dancing at the time at a club in Austin and obviously couldn't do that. And I had no idea what I was going to do, and I also didn't know if I was going to walk again, you know? And so I'm moving back into my parents' house, and I have like this already unhealthy relationship with substances that I didn't really realize. And I was supposed to have this huge house party on for my 21st birthday, and I was like in like crutches and like a half body cast, doing keg stands and snorting oxys off of girls.
Things.
Yeah. And I'm like, and I saw no problem with it. I didn't
Mhm.
see any issue with it. I was like, well, part of me was like, I knew I was struggling with my mental health because of the fact that like I had no idea what was going to happen with my legs, like, and I was moving back in with my parents, and I had this idea of what success was supposed to look like, and I knew that that wasn't it. But then part of me was also like, I'm just turning 21, like, fuck it, you know, party, YOLO, I'm young. And so, that was like a whole journey for me for sure because I ended up going to physical therapy about 8 months after that and kind of starting, it was about a year later that I really started like trying to navigate through the physical healing process of that injury. But there was a several really dark months where I was just in my parents' house getting oxy refill after refill after refill and figuring out how to snort it, figuring out how to take it different ways so that I could get higher. Like watching Adult Swim on Cartoon Network at like 4 a.m. just zonked out in my mind.
Mhm.
And that's when I think my opiate problem really started.
Really?
I could get refills like no issue, and I loved it. I loved the feeling of being high off opiates.
Yeah. I can remember sitting in Miami, Florida, shooting up and hitting, and just, I remember, I'm like, I'll do this forever. I fucking love this. Like, it was, yeah, I get exactly what you're saying.
And, you know, the people that came to visit me started slowing down. The people that had my back started slowing down, you know, and it was like, I didn't give a shit.
Right.
I could be alone in that room with my drugs all day and not have any emotion towards around, you know, feeling abandoned or feeling lost or confused about what my future was going to be. And then, you know, they started cutting back on my scripts. And then, you know, things changed pretty quickly for me. So,
For sure. Now, I've obviously been in the recovery world for, some years now. And so I've heard a lot of things, and I've never sat in a women's meeting. But one thing I do know from as many women as I worked with is there's a lot of sexual trauma, especially when in addiction, stuff like that. And so, but it's not something that's talked about so openly. But that's what I was talking about at the beginning of the episode. Is I feel anybody that's willing to be brave enough and stand up and talk about it could really, really affect somebody. So first of all, I just want to thank you for trusting me or trusting this to come on here and be willing to talk about it, because it's very powerful, especially the first time you told me about it. But so like going into that, like how did you go from there to there? How did you start getting into that?
so, um,
Because speaking from a guy's perspective, from our naive sense, I was always jealous of females because I'm like, oh, they get a free ATM. Like nobody's just tripping over themselves to give me free dope. That's just the way we looked at it as addicts. I'm not saying that's right. It's probably an asshole way to look at it. I was a heroin addict. That's just how I looked at it. Um,
yeah, I mean, I can see how that would be like a thing
that's
that
how we look. I'm not saying it's right, and that's highly insensitive. I was a drug addict when I thought that.
I can see how you could jump to that conclusion. Um, the violence and
See, that's the part we as men don't think about.
yeah, the violence and the things that you face as a woman struggling with addiction are things that like I wouldn't wish on
Right.
anyone.
No,
And it's conflicting because I think a lot of people are quick to jump to the conclusion, and I'm not saying you, but just like people in general of like, she's a stripper. Or, you know, she just fucked that guy a few days ago for a bag. Why is it rape now? Or, you know, stuff like that. And it's like, trigger warning. Like, I should probably say, you know, like, I don't talk about rape or sexual assault lightly. So, like, I'll lead with that. But it's what it is. And it happens so often. And no one does talk about it,
right.
you know? And there's so much shame around it. And there's so much
Self shame or shame from
I think
both,
both.
really?
I think that that's why women don't talk about it because it's like we as addicts often do embarrassing shit and but that doesn't mean that you deserve to be raped.
Right.
That doesn't mean that you deserve physical violence.
Ever.
And I just don't think women are saying that enough. And I don't think that women are hearing that enough that are still in that world, you know? Like I remember being with a bunch of girls and like laughing and trying to like joke about the things that were happening
Mm.
to like make light of it, you know, covered in bruises, like putting our makeup on, like, you know, and it's like that shouldn't be normalized. And I think it is, but it's like, how else do you deal with it? But I'll kind of go into the next part of my story. That was probably the darkest time in my life. I ended up meeting someone at a restaurant I was working at, and he moved into my apartment like a week after meeting him. And you know,
This is still when you're hungry for connection, right?
yes,
Okay.
yes. And I was single at the time and I was working at the club a little bit, but I was also waiting tables and um so like red flag number one, he moved in my apartment like super quick, really quick. Like, oh damn, like I just love you. Like, you know, he was in from out of town. Uh, I was just like so intrigued by his charming personality, and I was like, wow, I really like this guy. Like he just doesn't have a place to stay right now. And I didn't see that as a warning sign.
Right.
And I want to kind of highlight the warning signs as I go through them because I hope other people can maybe start to pick up on them sooner than I did. I end up finding out that his name isn't his name because I find his wallet and his ID, and the name that he introduced himself as was certainly not what was on his ID. Oh, I just don't really go by that anymore. I'm like, okay. I found out he had kids, a family. Didn't see anything wrong with that. Oh, he just didn't want to tell me because he didn't want to lose me. Just red flag after red flag. And I didn't do anything with that. I still continued to let him stay at my house. I was getting more and more into using with him to the point where like we were using every day heavily. And that's kind of when the meth came into the picture. So I was using heroin, using meth, popping pills, and drinking constantly. And it kind of spiraled really, really quickly. And I hate that I don't have like a better timeline of this time of my life, but I was blacked out for a lot of it. And I think trauma has made me forget things that are coming up in therapy now, which is super fun. But it turned into a very toxic, controlled, isolated type of situation very quickly where he didn't want me going anywhere but work. He didn't want me talking to anyone. He was cutting me off from friends and family. And it got to the point where I was pretty much in the apartment all the time with guns guarding the doors, his friends using violence to keep me home. Going through some really, really dark moments alone with him being the controlling factor and me not seeing anything wrong with it. And that's what kind of scares me is like I allowed myself to get into this situation and it spiraled so quickly and I just didn't know how to get myself out. I did not know how to get myself out. And I knew that when I tried, I was met with extreme violence and I was scared. And it was a really dark time of my life. And he ended up bringing some men that were from another country into the apartment one day. And I was told
And this is still your place.
our place at this point. We had kind of gotten kicked out and evicted several times. And so we were sharing a place at this point in time. And
We're still riding with him.
yeah. And I hadn't even been talking to my family. Like he had full control over my cell phone. He had full control over my car. And it's crazy to say all these things now because I would never let something like this happen.
That's
But
not the Amy I know.
yeah. And so I was strung out too. You have to factor in, like, I was so dependent on this dude for my drugs that, like, I just wasn't, I was not myself.
I get it.
And, he ended up bringing some men around from another country. And I remember the second they came into our house or our apartment that, like, I felt the energy change in the apartment. It was dark and it was scary and it was uncomfortable. And I just remember feeling like that, even while using, like I felt like this darkness with them that like I can't really explain. It gives me like chills. um, and I remember the drugs changed, and I remember feeling like it wasn't fun anymore, and it was painful, and I was being forced to do drugs at certain times, and I was being held down, and there was a lot of violence. And so it got dark really fast. And sorry, I've never really talked about this like this. So we ended up at a motel in Austin, and there were some girls there, and I was basically told like make sure that you guys are doing what you're supposed to do. And I was like, what's, like what does that mean? Like I was confused by that. And it turned pretty quickly into a 6-day hostage situation where me and several other women were held against our will. And um you just kind of like hoped that they didn't pick you whenever you heard them coming in, and um, you hoped that you were going to get out of there alive, honestly. I didn't know if I was going to make it out of that situation alive. And I knew like that's not what I wanted for my life anymore. And I knew that I had to do something different if I made it out of there. So it was a really, really horrible week. And every day I did what I had to do. I feel like whether it
Just one second. I'm sorry. Just to be clear, these women are being used for prostitution, sex trafficking, all that stuff. Okay.
and I remember there was a few times where I tried to fight back, or like there was a girl that was definitely underage and I tried to stick up for her, and I was met with a pistol across my forehead and injected with drugs. Like, and I remember the drugs weren't what I was used to doing. Like
Yeah.
it was almost like, I don't know, but like I would be out of it for like
Yeah, they're trying
more.
to subdue you, right?
Yeah, I definitely think there was some kind of tranquilizer or something in there. So I ended up I'll tell you how I got out of the situation because I think that's important.
Very important. But what's fucking crazy and what it just even sitting here, I've heard this before, but what pisses me off about all this is like you're sitting there saying that this was happening in a motel in Austin. Like I live in Austin. And so for people to sit here and think for a second, like this shit is happening every fucking day. Tonight when you sit down for dinner, this is happening right now in your town, in your city. Like that's what's fucking crazy to me.
Oh, for sure. It's definitely happening. And once it got busted, the whole ring, a lot of the hotel workers were in on it and they knew exactly what was going on. And it was all over the news.
How the fuck could you sleep at night? Jesus.
People want their money and they don't care. Um, and so I remember we got put in a van, and it was me and two other girls at this point. And, we're beat down. We haven't been eating. We're covered in bed bugs. We're like disgusting, and we're getting put in this van. And we go back, and I realize and I feel like it's so easy to be like, well, why didn't you just run? Or, why didn't I? And I've had a really hard time sharing my story because of the fear of judgment of like, there's so many things you could have done differently. And it's like, I need people to understand that when you're in that situation, like you don't know what you're going to do.
Right.
And
Yeah, it all sounds good.
yeah,
It all sounds good when you hear the story. Oh, I would have did this. I would have done that.
and it's like, it's not a fucking movie. Like, and you're trying to survive and you're not mentally clear. You're weak. You're getting threats that like, if you do this, this is going to happen to her. And they would use the younger girl against the older girls to try and, say like, if you don't do this, then this is going to happen to her. And sometimes it would. And, it's like, damn, like it's a lose-lose situation, and it's not a simple answer. So I do remember thinking like, can I get out of this van? I don't think I can, like there's men with guns. There's I guess you'd call him my boyfriend. I don't know. Like, I hate even saying that word, but, the guy that I thought was going to love me and take care of me driving. And we end up back at my apartment. And I'm like, what the, like, okay, I know this territory. Like, what can I do in this situation? So it's like 2 o'clock in the morning or something like that, I'm assuming. And we're getting like, and this was in the hood. Like, no one is going to bat an eye at some guys with some bitches, like, which is sad and unfortunate. But we end up getting kind of like brought into my apartment with these men.
Mhm.
And, they're still using a lot of, force and aggression. And we're put in the upstairs bathroom, and I'm like, okay, I'm in my bathroom, and I remember thinking, like, holy shit, this is my moment. Like, I have to do something now, or I don't know if I'm going to be able to do something again. And so I'm like trying to like tell the girls, like, just this, we have to use this opportunity. We have to get the fuck out of here. So we were in the upstairs bathroom, and there was a guy at the door, telling us to shut the fuck up, get down, be quiet. And I still don't know why we were there.
He's in the bathroom with you, or
He was at the
outside?
door.
Okay.
And
Door open?
no, the door's closed.
Sure.
And so I hear my ex downstairs, and I hear him talking to police. And I'm like, okay, this is it. Like, I can't miss this opportunity. So I just start screaming. I start screaming and screaming and screaming. And that's the last thing I remember of that situation, because I'm assuming what happened is he opened the door and knocked me out. Because the next thing I remember is I'm waking up on a curb, and I'm outside my apartment, and there's cops everywhere. Like, the whole apartment complex was shut down. They're putting my ex in the back of a cop car. They're helping the other two girls get cleaned up, and I'm just like, what the fuck just happened? But I'm like, I'm fucking here, and I'm alive, and I'm not in that fucking bathroom anymore.
And then there's a big God moment coming up, right?
Yeah.
In your story?
Yeah.
Continue.
And
This is my favorite part.
I just remember being like, holy shit, like, it's over. It's over. Like, that fucking nightmare is over, because it was so scary to not know, like, if I was going to make it out of there. And so, like, the cops were kind of tending to me and, like, tending to the other girls. And, like, the youngest girl was kind of, like, the focus, because she was beat up pretty bad. And I remember I had, like, a wet washcloth on my forehead. I'm bleeding, I'm just, like, literally, like, a shell of a human at this point. And I actually asked her if I could talk about her today, because there was a girl from my past, and her name's Destiny. And
Shout out Destiny.
she was walking by with her baby in a stroller. And, like, she was like, Amy? And I just remember just breaking down.
Y'all hadn't seen each other?
We hadn't seen each other in, like, 10 years. And the fact that her name's Destiny's pretty cool.
Right. And the fact that you had just went through what you just went through.
Yeah.
And Destiny's walking around the corner. Holy shit.
And so she's fucking fabulous. She's, like, a gorgeous little baddie, and I love her. But she's walking with her baby. And yeah, she probably didn't recognize me, I can assume. And she's like, Amy, like, what the fuck, And I was like, I need a ride home. And she was like, I got you. Like, what do you need? What's going on? And I can't actually quote her too much, because we might get canceled. But she's basically saying, like, what the fuck did he do to you? What's going on? What, how did we get here? And I'm like, can you just take me home?
Yeah.
And so I remember sitting in the backseat of her car, and, she's driving me back to my parents' house in Pflugerville. They have no idea I'm about to show up covered in bed bugs, beat the fuck up. They have no idea where I've been. They have no idea what I've been through. This is probably going to be a rude awakening if they hear this, because I don't think they even understand the depths, the trauma of that 6 days. And I remember, like, this is so theatrical and kind of dramatic, but I remember I was in the back seat with her baby, and I'm just, like, looking at the blood drying all over my legs, and I'm like, and I put my hand on the car seat, and her little baby just reached over and grabbed my hand. And I remember, like, being like, I made it out, and I'm going to be okay. And Destiny's driving me home, and this is it for me. Like, I have to do something different. And I promised myself in the back seat that day that like I would never ever allow a relationship or a man to dictate my safety, my heart, or my future like ever again. I was like, I can't go back there to that place.
Thank God. What a story. That was incredible. I'm so happy you made it out. What so now, I mean, the human being that I know today, I would have never ever guessed because you are a badass runner. You are fucking working in the ER. You're in school. Like you're doing everything. You make me feel lazy. Like what all are you up to?
Um,
What's
I
life look for you like now?
It's beautiful, honestly. It's so beautiful. Like I have an opportunity to show up as someone that I've never been able to show up as before. Um, and life hasn't been perfect. I've had some slip ups with my sobriety. I've had some slip ups with my mental health where I haven't made it a primary focus, and it showed in my life during those times. But right now, life is beautiful. I'm working at an ER in Round Rock, a level one trauma center, baby. We see it all. I am,
You're built for that though. You've been preparing for this job for years.
yeah, I love the chaos for sure. I'm in nursing school, so I'm not technically an RN yet. So I kind of work supporting the nursing staff
RN
as
support.
of right now. But it's a really good experience for school. So I'm in full-time nursing school. I work at the ER. I run when I can. I am as involved with the recovery community as I can be because I feel like that is what lights my heart on fire, honestly. Getting to see other women get better and get help and be a part of it is so powerful and important to me that I would definitely put that at the top of my list of cool shit that I get to do today. And I think that vulnerability is so important in the recovery community, as we talk about sharing your story. Like, what's the point in going through these things if you don't use it to help someone else?
Yep.
And I didn't really understand that at first until I started connecting with other women because of their stories. And me feeling accepted and me feeling like, okay, I can talk openly in these rooms because of me making connections with other women because they shared their stories.
Right.
And I was like, I'm basically being selfish by not starting to share mine.
Right.
So yeah, I get to have like a spiritual experience every fucking day that I wake up because I get to feel things that I never got to feel before. I spent so many years running away from my problems and doing anything that I could possibly get my hands on to not feel. And now I get to feel things and it's pretty fucking awesome and painful. And it's not always a good time, but it's my life, and I'm so happy that I got to make it to where I am because there's so many times that I shouldn't have been here.
Right.
I have multiple overdoses on my books. I got a hostage situation. I got ran over by a car. Like, God's clearly got bigger plans for me because ain't no way. Ain't no way.
Right. I can remember, all the meetings and stuff I've been to, but the meetings I can remember are the speaker meetings where I heard somebody say some shit, you know what I mean, out of their story, that's what hit me. That's really what motivated me and let me know it was possible. You know what I mean? The shares and stuff were cool, but it was people's stories that really sucked me in and made me realize. That's why I think people can help people on a large scale.
Well, it's relatable, right? Like,
Right.
that's what we're looking for is that connection. And that's such a huge part of the recovery community is connection. I found it to be like a flex for so long, like that I'm a heartless, cold bitch that doesn't need anybody. I literally thought that was like a flex. Like, I was proud of it.
I got one deep tatted on my arm because I thought it was cool.
Yeah, yeah, you know how it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so now, like, I get to have these like amazing experiences with these women, and like I have my brothers too in recovery, and I just love it. Like the moments that we have is so genuine and real and raw and authentic, and it's family, and it's a family that I think I've been looking for my whole life. And like that's not to minimize my beautiful, amazing family that I have, but it's something that I was seeking without realizing it for so long. And it's so powerful what that community can bring to the table. So,
Right. I can remember sitting down with one time with my mom, and she started asking me a bunch of questions. And at this time, I'm like 6, 7 years sober, and she's asking me all these questions about back when I wasn't doing well and I was in addiction and this and that. And everything she asked me, I was like, I don't remember. I don't know. I don't remember. And she's like, how don't you remember these things? And I was like, I was high.
Yeah.
I don't remember any of these things. And so I remember her saying, she's like, well, I just don't understand how you're just like okay with all this stuff. And I was like, well, it definitely changes things when you're able to use that stuff to help people and you start seeing it do good in the world, then you realize why you went through it all.
Yeah.
Because before, if I would have just went and started working a 9 to 5, I have no idea why the fuck I went through all that shit. And then even with my wife, when we first got together and she first started being around some recovery people, one time specifically, we were hanging out with another couple there in recovery, and at some point somebody broke the seal on drug humor, and so we were all just going. And at the end of the night, she's sitting there like shell shocked, and they left, and she's like, "I don't get it. How can you just sit here and talk about all these or laugh about all these traumatic things?" And I was like, "Well, what else are you gonna do with it? Like, am I just gonna sit here and wallow and poor me? Like." After a while, once you're far enough removed and you get to the point where you can laugh about some of this shit, like you're in a good fucking spot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's
For
cool.
sure.
What how did you even get involved in running? Because I tell people all the time, like as a trainer, as a runner and all that stuff, it is way easier for me to get people into the gym than it is to get people for a run. So how did you get into it?
So my first like attempt at sobriety was in like 2019, and I was like a little gym rat, and I was like, okay, COVID happened, so the gyms all closed, and I was like, well, I got to find something to do, right? You know, and so I just literally started running and
Just on your own?
obsessed.
Okay.
So I signed up for a trail race. I started in trail running.
Which you should.
Yeah, I know. You have to start there. And so I loved the community. I loved the challenge. You know, trail running is a different, you know, you get it. It's a different type of sport than road running for sure.
When I leave here today, I'm headed out to Leakey, Texas for a trail running camp.
Are you running though?
Yeah, all veterans. I was there yesterday. I left specifically to come do this with you.
Oh, okay.
Feel special. I'm kidding.
Okay, anyway. So I signed up for a trail race in Zion, Utah.
Okay. Oh, wow. You do a travel race your first race?
Yes.
Let's go.
And
That's awesome.
I also did not know what I was signing myself up for.
Right.
Because of COVID, they closed like the course, and it ended up being like from, you know how they rate the courses, like from like moderate to like extreme.
Yeah.
It like ended up being like pretty fucking extreme.
How far?
Half marathon.
Okay.
So, and not an ultra.
That's all right.
But yeah, so I ended up going and doing that race, and I was just hooked. I was fucking hooked. I remember like, you know, I'm running through the Zion Mountains. Like, it doesn't get any better than that. And having this out of body experience and getting runner's high for like the first time and being like, okay, now I get it. Like, I get this shit. This is good.
Right.
So, that's kind of how that started. And I still run, but, you know, I've had to kind of work to accept that right now my training isn't as consistent as I would like it to be because of school. I have to kind of prioritize nursing school right now, and that's frustrating. But I still try and get a little run in every morning because it's like my meditation in the morning.
Yep.
That's how I clear my head. It's really hard for me to like sit and like
Me too.
like yeah, like I try, but it's easier for me to just put my shoes on, no headphones, go out and just move my body and just get started if nothing else.
That
So.
running is my meditation. Any problem I'm having, I feel better when I'm running. I can work everything out. I can have conversations in my head. It's the best meditation I've ever. I know meditation is supposed to like clear your head and do all that, but it's not for me.
Yeah. My family always jokes when we're out of town. They're like, just don't talk to her till she's gone out for her run. Like,
Oh, really?
just don't mess with her. And if she misses her run, just we apologize in advance. Like, because I'm a better me whenever I'm done running for sure.
How do you feel that running's affected your recovery, sobriety?
Oh, it's so important. You know, if I have that big run in the morning or I have a race coming up, you know, that just aligns perfectly with my values that align in sobriety, you know, like going to bed early, eating healthy, like those things align with what I'm trying to do with my recovery and sobriety. So, you know, I'm not going to be up at 2 a.m. wondering what I should do and if I should go buy some dope if I know I have a run that I care about in the morning, you know. So it just kind of has, I wouldn't say it's like been the main factor, but like it's definitely just aligned and supported my sobriety for sure. It's given me something to care about. It's given me something to look forward to and kind of put that energy in somewhere else that like I was using for other things that weren't healthy.
How did that affect your anxiety and everything?
Um, my anxiety is way less intense whenever I'm being physically active.
Right.
It just helps clear those negative thoughts for me. And I think I kind of process through things whenever I'm running that I don't even realize are coming up as problems
Yeah.
until I'm, out there trying to clear my head. So it's definitely like saved my life in some ways, for sure, I would say.
Good shit. Love it. When's your next race?
I have a half marathon Decker coming up.
When's that? When's that? December?
I think it's in like 24 days.
Is that December?
Yeah, early December.
This may
And
not come out till January, so.
it's a hard course. So I'm doing the Austin Distance Challenge right now. So it's a series of races, and it ends with the half marathon downtown. I'm not trying to do a full right now. It's too time consuming.
Yeah. And if I do recall, we have a Spartan race coming up pretty soon, right?
We do have
Let's not forget about that.
we do have a Spartan race coming up.
Do you want to do a Spartan race? All right, she's going to do a Spartan race with us.
Yeah, so we have that to look forward to. That'll be fun.
Yeah, that's what. Trail race I would have a little bit of anxiety about because I like want to perform and do well. Spartan race, I'm ready to just go out and have fun.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it.
So you are heavily influenced by the rap music, right?
Yeah.
Throughout your life.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So who were your main influences? Who were your favorite artists? Top 5 if you can rattle them off.
God. Well, that's so hard because there's so many different eras of my life. But if I have to just go off of like the first things that came to mind right now, were my younger, like probably some Houston rap for sure, like Zero, Trey, Big Mo, Eminem. Well, Eminem's not Houston, but I'm thinking of people that really influenced me as a younger person. Eminem was a big one. I was obsessed with 50 Cent and G Unit. But I would say Zero and Trey the Truth, like
Little ABN.
ABN, It Is What It Is, Assholes by Nature all day. Like that's what I grew up on, I feel like, for so long. And when I say grow up, I'm talking, 16, 17, 18, 19. But like that's when I really tapped into music being like where I escaped whenever I was unfortunately using too. But like I would use music to escape and I just would dive into the lyrics and I would just obsess over these albums coming out. I remember like, do you remember Piranha Records?
Mm-mm.
It's like a little like
Who was on it?
well no, it's a shop.
Okay.
And it was like a little
Is that Houston?
this was in Round Rock.
Okay.
They outskirts of Round Rock. It was just a record store, but they would get these remixes chopped and screwed. Like
Oh, really?
Little Flip would put out an album and then they would chop and screw it and like they would mix it with some DJ Screw shit and like I just remember like walking every time I knew there was an album that was going to drop, like in my little like slides from my house to like try and get a ride to go to Piranha Records and get these albums that would drop because I loved the screwed and chopped. Like I loved that shit and that Houston vibe. So those were definitely some major influencers in my hip hop journey.
We had Underdog Records where I was from.
Okay.
See, that was our little spot where we would go get it. But I could spend hours in the CD store just going through everything.
I know.
And I knew when people were dropping or who was beefing, and like I was completely obsessed.
And I mean, I had my Tupac and Biggie moments. Like there was always like I kind of went through phases. I feel like where I was like stuck in one rapper, but there's just so many. I don't even know where to start.
Right. I feel the same way.
And it's like based on mood too. Am I looking for like an DMX vibe? Am I looking for, like you can't just.
You're very well versed in that.
You can't just name 5.
I mean, you can, but it's just your top 5 favorite. You don't have to name top 5. But what would you say? What's one song that like? What's that one heart song where it's like brings that emotion out of you?
That's not.
You don't got one?
I can't think of one.
No?
There's so many.
Name any one of them.
Mm.
Or better yet, my favorite question for the whole podcast, every podcast I do it, Hypothetically speaking, you're walking out for the UFC Women's Championship of the World tonight. What's your walkout song?
Oh, dang, that's a good one. I should have been more prepared for this. I know what you asked. Okay, here's a good one. There's a remix of Game Over by Little Flip,
Came over that.
and I feel like that would be my walkout song because it's such
That's his best song in my opinion.
yeah. I'm like, I mean, it's game over. Like,
Right. I like it.
no more ceilings, bitch. The top bitch has arrived. It's time to fight. Let's go.
Let's go. I love
Let's fucking go.
I knew about Trey and Zero. I was like one of the only people up north that really knew about him. And then Mike Jones came out with Still Tipping, and everybody's on their Houston shit. But I'm from the Midwest, so we were like a melting pot. I would get everything, but I'd go visit my dad in New York, and so like you would have those chopped and screwed mixes. We'd have mixtapes up there, and so that's where you would get all the unreleased street, Dipset,
Yes.
D Block, G Unit, but like the street shit that wasn't on the albums. And so I would go up there and just like buy everything that I could and bring it back home.
Hell yeah.
That whole mixtape shit I was obsessed.
Yeah, hell yeah. And I feel like you have to like, it's like an acquired taste, chopped and screwed. Like, I feel like,
Didn't understand it at first, but then once I moved down here, I grew to definitely understand.
like June 27, like, you know, like that's just like something you can't like explain that.
There's a bunch of people listening to this right now that are saying, what's June 27th?
It's like a really long screwed song. And
Isn't that screwed?
That's my emotional song. That brings out emotion in me.
I like it.
No, it's a good song. It was one of Screw's biggest songs.
Yeah.
For sure.
So let's say somebody was listening to this today and they've been through a degree of some of what you've been through, but they're out there still struggling. What would you say to them?
Avoid isolation in all areas. I think that that's how you get into trouble. Not reaching out for help, having shame around what you're going through, being scared. I'll tell you what's fucking scary is being locked in an apartment protected by guns telling you can't leave. And I feel like if I had spoken up sooner, I might have been able to avoid that. And I just see now that isolation from my family and from my friends and from healthy connections is what fed into me getting into that situation. And I think that that's what people struggle with in sobriety as well, is just being scared to reach out for help, and they end up starting to isolate, and that's when bad things happen. So I would say, you know, don't be afraid to ask for help. Like, I finally did, and I'm so glad that I did. And it was hard. Asking for help is humbling, it's scary, it's uncomfortable, but I think that that's the first step into getting your life back.
Be glad you did too, right?
I'm so glad I did.
I'm glad you did. So we can't end the podcast without talking about the fire t-shirt you have on, because one day I saw you with this t-shirt on. You did a post and I hit you up immediately and was like, yo, where'd you get that? So you put me on to a gentleman named Trap Lives Matter, and I immediately ordered some shit from him. So
we support each other's shopping problem.
Yeah, for sure. We both got the bug. But how did you stumble upon that across on the internet or what?
Yeah, I think I was watching his TikTok live actually one day, and I was like, okay, his shit is fire. And I told him like, you know, I'm in recovery. I think your shit's dope. And he ended up messaging me, and we like exchanged some words, but he was just super supportive. And then I have like all his merch now, and the back says no fentanyl, which is dope.
Yeah.
So Trap Lives Matter on social media. I better get a free shirt for that.
Right. Let's do a collab, bro. What's up?
Yes.
I like it. I mean, I can't thank you enough so much for trusting me and trusting this show to come on and talk about your experience. Like, I hope this helps every single woman out there. Thank you for being so brave.
One woman, I'd be happy.
Good stuff. So the way we like to wrap up the show, if you'd be so kind, if you want to take a look in your camera over here and maybe throw out some I am statements to let them know who Amy is.
I am healing. I am strong. I am in nursing school. And I am completely obsessed, dedicated, and in love with the woman that I am becoming.
Let's fucking go.